I read it to him, and I don't think I looked up. I think I just sat there and I read it with tears streaming down my face. I look up at the end, and he's just weeping. He's sitting on the floor. I'll never forget it. And he said the most unexpected, beautiful thing. He said, let me tell you what happened when I was growing up. And he said, because this isn't your fault.
Access more.
Life is like a roller coaster, but it's better when we go through it together. Welcome to the Candace Cameron Bure Podcast. My guest host this season is Jennie Allen, and today we're talking about families and emotions. Her current book is Untangle Your Emotions, and it's the perfect companion to these conversations. We're back talking about family.
This is one of those topics that I think for everybody, we've all got stories, right? We've all got the memories of what it was like to grow up in our families and how they shaped us. And so, yeah, this is a big week.
Yeah, huge week. I immediately am thinking of my current family and my children and what a huge celebratory event we just had with Lev and Elliot's wedding, which was so amazing. And I know I talked about it a little in the first episode, but there was having my entire family, wasn't my entire family. There were cousins and some people that, my family's really big, that weren't in attendance. However, having my mom and dad, my brother, my sisters, all of their children there in one room together with my children and husband and then getting my in-laws to meet my entire family. I can't tell you how special it was. Yeah. And I feel very blessed that I have a family that I really enjoy, not just love, but I enjoy being around them. And I know not everyone has that family dynamic. Yeah. And that's not to say that we don't have our issues and there's not problems within the family. There always are. Like, that's what family's all about. Yeah. There's always something going on. But it was an incredible time together that I will not only remember, but I just value it and cherish it so much, especially as we're getting older, because I hope that happens many, many more times in the future. But you kind of never know when you're all going to be in the same room together. Right. Especially because we don't all live in the same city.
Yeah. And I think it's so encouraging to hear stories like that, even for people that maybe don't have as strong a family or it feels really broken for them, because we all want to know that that's possible. We all want to know that possibly we could do it better or have a better dream for our lives. And I think so many people that have built really beautiful, strong families came from brokenness. They wanted to do it differently than their family. So if anybody's listening and just jealous or feels like, I wish I felt close to my family, I get it. Like, I think that's a hard thing, but I also think it's so good, Candace, like when you show pictures of your family and you and your brother and like just, it's just close. I think it's just hopeful for people. Yeah. I think it's so encouraging.
Yeah. And it,
because it's missing in the world a lot.
It is missing in the world. It's very rare. And I've come from a long line of successful marriages in my family. So both my sets of grandparents were married over 65 years. Oh, until death do them part. Wow. Yeah. And my parents have been married for 53 years. Maybe it's 54. Val and I are going on 28 years this year. So I also feel that the example I've gotten for generational family sticking together. And I get it. Listen, people stick together and they're not always happy in it. Right. I understand that's a very big reality too. Yeah. But they're really... I know that there was certainly a day that I don't know that my family would be together if it weren't for the example that my parents and my grandparents had given us, and the strength that they had and the truthfulness that they had, and honesty to speak into us, saying, we've been through this. Right. We know how hard this is. We've been in this place together. I mean, even when I was 12, my parents almost got divorced. That's what brought us to faith and the church, because before then we were not church-going people.
Tell me more about that. That's really powerful.
Yeah. I've shared this in my testimony, but my parents had the 4 of us kids, and I don't know all the intimate details of the problems that they were having, but it came
but we can all imagine. Marriage is hard. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were on the brink of divorce, and my mom moved out, and I moved into an apartment with my mom because I was working on Full House.
Wow. Candace.
And because my mom was the one who would take me to work every day, but they needed a separation. And I know that they truly wanted to work through it, but they needed that time apart. And so, that was a really sad day. I remember going to school and going into the girls' bathroom with a couple of my friends. And I believe at that time I was 5th or 6th grade, and I cried to them, and I was like, I think my parents are getting a divorce and my mom's moved out and I'm with her. And it's like weird that I'm not.
That's so hard.
And yet my parents had friends that were Christians and said, let's try counseling, come to our church. And they offer marital counseling. And
listen to that, church leaders out there, for real. I really believe every church should hire a counselor and offer it for free.
I do too.
Something I wish could happen.
I do too.
Just with the mental health crisis.
I will get on that train with you.
Okay, good. Let's just push it.
Help make that happen.
Yep.
I believe it too. So that's really what brought us to church. And my mom was a believer, but she was a very quiet believer. My dad wanted nothing to do with religion. It's why we never talked about it in our house. My dad was like, religion is for people when they're 18. They want to decide if they want to believe in something, great. And so, but
meaning if y'all grew up and needed that, good for you.
Yeah, good for you. But like, we're not talking about it in our home. And that's something that you decide later. So they started going to church through marital counseling, but that then brought us to church as a family on Sundays. And that really changed the dynamic of our life. And then it changed the communication at home. And I never felt that it was so bad. I would say my childhood was very happy. And even with my parents, they were never yellers or screamers. So even though they were having disagreement, like to this day, I don't even know what the intimate details were. And yet they wanted to reconcile and work it out. And they put the work in, and we all noticed at home. And the biggest changes were in my dad. So I think there was probably dad, and I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but probably at the time, maybe a lack of compassion or empathy, a lack of treating my mom maybe the way she wanted to be treated, with more love. And, I don't know. Those are kind of my guesses. Maybe he was just like a man's man and didn't. I'm sure there were other bigger things, but it was so wonderful to then watch them take this time, which I want to hear about your family because I can come back to this, but watch them take the time to make changes and do it in front of us kids. So it wasn't always behind closed doors.
It's huge. And we are talking in the next few weeks about marriage, about parenting. We're talking about really practical ways this looks for all of us. And I think it'll apply wherever you are in life. If you're single, if you're young, I think you'll appreciate the conversations because I think we all relate to the roles we play in these different stages. But I'll say about this conversation specifically, that one thing that you just said, that they did it in front of you, is going to apply to everything. Because the more you see conflict worked out in a healthy way, the more you're able to learn how to do it. The more you see emotions worked out in a healthy way, felt and shared in a healthy way, that's how we learn. And so I think it's such a great way to start. I actually have chill bumps thinking about starting with this story because, when you think about all the people listening, and maybe you've been with us since week 1 and you feel a little bit discouraged because you're like, man, I didn't know how emotionally unhealthy I was. I didn't know I have these places I need to grow, but I don't know what to do. And I think looking at your parents and looking at myself and looking at so many people, you can change and grow. Like you can grow in this. This is something you can learn and do better. And even for me right now, as we'll talk about next week or in a few weeks with parenting, I'm doing better with my kids. Like I'm doing better. I didn't do it right. And I'm learning. Even last night, like Kate and I went to dinner and my daughter's here with me. And we had just such a great conversation about our family and what works and what doesn't.
I love
and
that.
how to grow. And she's 22. So, we keep going. And I think that's so encouraging about your family. But I also know all of that made you who you were. Like you saw the brokenness and that was really scary and hard.
Yep.
And now then you see like Jesus really come in and change your parents and your family. So do you look back and go, man, that without that, I would have maybe not had the emotional stability or health that I had? Like how do you put that in your own current life and where you are today?
Yeah, not that I wanted my parents to go through something so difficult, but I'm so grateful for it today. Yeah. I really am, because I look back and I see some of the struggles that they had in their marriage. And like the very thing I told you, it worked wonders in our marriage to have people before us say, I've been there and you can do this. You guys can do this together. To have the strength of God to work through whatever, but also permission. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things from my parents was not that I need their permission, but it felt so empathetic. I felt like I was safe in that they're saying, but if a decision's made that you can't work through this, we're here for you.
Sure.
And
that's so many people's story, right?
Because the judgment factor, like, I already know I'm going to be judged by God. I don't want to be judged by other people too. Yeah. And that was just the fact that my parents could both relate and say, we understand, but we're going to support you in every decision to make this and help this work, but get it if you're, for whatever reason, if it didn't. So they really, for those experiences, I'm so grateful. And then obviously the church changed my family. I saw my dad change right before our eyes over the years. And my dad is a man of faith today. It took him a long time. I don't think he gave his life to Jesus until he was maybe in his 50s. My dad's 80 now. Yeah. But back then when we were married, or my parents were newly married and we were young kids. Yeah. 30s, 40s. And we were going to church every weekend, but my dad was still not a Christian. He was faithful in wanting to work on the marriage with my mom, but still didn't believe the word of God. Yeah. And that came like 30 years after. My mom prayed for my dad for 30 years to come to Christ. And so it's amazing to see the changes in my
mamas out there, like all the mamas that are praying for their kids, that are praying for their husbands, that are I just think we'll get to heaven and realize that a lot of amazing miracles happen because a lot of mamas were praying.
Yeah, exactly.
So amazing.
Exactly. So
well, and I just to tie this in for everybody, because it's so powerful what you're sharing. And I think we all are shaped more than we would like to admit by the experiences of our family. But what you're saying is even the bad ones shaped you. And I think that gives so much grace for us to do this in a messy way, to do this imperfectly, to, even like one of my best friends, her parents did end up divorcing. And I remember being in counseling and saying, why does my friend feel more emotionally healthy than me sometimes? And he said, you can go through really traumatic circumstances as a kid. If you don't go through it alone, you'll be okay. But if you go through it alone, no matter how small or big it is, you're going to feel the trauma of that in a bigger way. And so even for y'all out there that you think, gosh, our marriage did end or whatever, you're sitting there going, it didn't work out for me. The key is like lean in to those babies, like pull them up close, even if those babies are 16, like just find a way in so that they don't feel alone, because that really is, I think, the most important thing as far as the way God made our brains, that we not feel alone, which is also the power of God, because God is with us. Like no one is a closer friend. No one is a closer counselor than the Spirit of God with us. So yeah, I do think there's hope and also just hope that you can work things out. I mean, we both, you can get this if you want to there. But we both have struggled in our marriage. Like both of us have. We've shared and bonded over that and come out on the other side. And I think that, we'll talk about that next week, but it is just, I think this is what I pray about this project is that it would feel like marriage counseling. It would feel like help with parenting. It would feel like help with friendship, because so much of marriage doesn't break down just because of an affair. It breaks down before that. It breaks down when you can't emotionally connect and you feel hurt by each other,
Yeah.
So this is the beginning. And
Well, tell me about your family. What was the dynamic like growing up?
Well, I'm so blessed that I grew up with both my parents were believers and they loved me. I mean, my dad used to tuck us in every single night and tell us stories. I remember we used to do Advent every Christmas, and my dad was an elder in our church, and they loved God and they loved me. And yet they, my dad would say, it's so sweet, he lets me tell the story, but he was really critical and put a lot of pressure on us. We were 3 girls. We have 2 sisters. And so I think growing up in that environment, I just was very confused because I was such a pleaser. And I think I probably was born that way. My middle sister isn't as much of that, which is good for her. But I was growing up and I couldn't figure it out. It was like a formula it was like oxygen for me to get approval, especially from my dad. And I couldn't get it. And so I just, it was hard. And so I look back and I don't regret any of that, because honestly, that was what drove me to God. Because when I understood the gospel, I was just mad about him. I just loved him. I just thought God was the greatest thing. It was like all my life, I kind of wanted to be the apple of somebody's eye. And while I think my dad would have wanted that, and I think he would have even thought he was showing me that, I missed it. And so that led me to, when I understood who God was, I wanted that, because I felt unconditionally loved and unconditionally accepted. And that was so transformative for me. But emotions in my house,
what age was that when
that was 17?
17. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think I've shared here that I had an eating disorder, at that time and throughout college.
Another connection.
Yeah. So much in common. Our kids are the same age too. It's so fun. But I know like all that was part of that season of my life. And of course, right. Like the pressure and it's a natural way that expresses itself, I guess, in an unhealthy way. And so I just felt like I just fell in love with a God who wasn't expecting perfection out of me. And, now, I mean, my dad and I are so close. My dad is so different. He's so tender and he's changed so much. Again, evidence we can change. But I don't think we were very emotional. I mean, my dad, I remember getting in trouble, but I don't remember even crying about it, even though I hated getting in trouble. I just remember like facts, like, okay, I don't need to do that again. Okay. It was more pragmatic and I was just
emotions were a little more void in your family.
Yeah. My mom is so funny. She, even recently I had to call her with some hard news about one of my sisters going through something. And she just heard the news and it was pretty big news. And she goes, okay, well, we can go through that. We can do that. That was her reaction.
Wow.
And can you tell your dad? I don't want to tell your dad. So I was like, okay. Call my dad. My dad wept. Again, my dad's grown. My dad's way more tender today.
Yeah.
And I think, we're all different. My mom is still emotional. She just doesn't show it. She's Midwestern and grew up with really tough parents and siblings. And that was just how it was.
Yeah.
So I think I learned that. I mean, sometimes my friends laugh at me being in the South, just that I am near Midwestern. Like I'm passionate, but I don't just cry a lot or any of that. I think some of that was learned from my mom. And I know there are people listening right now that are in the Midwest or in cultures that it's that way. And I certainly am not suggesting that you have to express all of this all the time to everyone, but learning to do it in your own way with your personality, right, is what the goal is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my husband and his side of the family is
totally different. Right.
So we've had to work through some of that. We'll talk about that in marriage, but it's just, you see all the different dynamics of family and how our parents trained us in a way that we would respond or connect or not emotionally.
Right.
And then it's a whole other thing once you get married, and then you have to figure out the dynamics of your new family.
You came from a whole, and I think that's something to be, to be aware of, is that nobody's coming into this with a blank slate. Like, we've all learned things, and a lot of times they're unhealthy and we need to unlearn them. And so again, I think this is the kind of inventory that really helps you mature, is to just think about how were emotions handled in your family. Were you shamed for feeling sad or angry? Or were you comforted? Were you listened to? Were you cared for in that? I think one thing I've learned is even like my kids growing up when they were toddlers and they were just throwing a fit somewhere. One thing I've learned is to put myself in a 2-year-old's shoes. What context do they have? They don't have the context of they're in Costco and they're embarrassing me. They don't have that context. I'm not saying you just never punish or discipline your kids, but to be aware of their reality, right? To just go emotionally, they didn't get what they want. They don't have any control over that yet. Yeah. They're learning it, and we have to teach it to them. But we can teach it to them with kindness to their feelings. Yeah. And we'll talk more about that in parenting. But right now, that was also you. Like, if you're listening to this, like, how you got handled at Target affected you. Right. Were you pulled over and spanked? Was your ear pulled on? Like, that's kind of how the olden days did it. I don't know that they do that anymore, but I mean, I remember my ear getting pulled on. I remember, sit down now. And, there was a fear in me of acting out for sure. And again, that was just typical parenting. It's not like my parents were abusive or anything. That's just how it went back then. So I think all of us could, pile together a little list of like, okay, gosh, I remember this happened. I remember when I was feeling really sad. And, my mom used to always say, I would come home from middle school and be left out of something, of course, like everybody. And it would be devastating and I would be weeping. And she would say, they're just jealous of you, Jennie. Just hysterical thing to say and completely untrue. I was just cut out. I was just left out. But it was her way of like, I don't know how to comfort you right now. Yeah. But I'm going to make you feel better that you're great. It's not you. Yeah. It's like, well, sometimes it is us. Like sometimes we're just not invited, Yeah. So, all of our parents have these funny things that we say, and we do it too, of when you're feeling sad, what do they say? What do they do? And again, my mom was doing the best she could. It's not like she was doing anything wrong. It didn't teach me to process my sadness and disappointment. Yeah. It made me think, well, I shouldn't feel this way because I'm great and the circumstance isn't as bad and it's okay. Right. And so I think that's where we've got to look back. And one of the main takeaways people are saying from the book is, one of the big things is just, I had no idea how much my parents had shaped my view of emotions. Yeah. And of course they did. Of course they did. And so many good parents, me too. My kids can tell you the stories. Don't do a great job at it. It's not that we're really hurting or harming, but we're just not teaching and training and helping, I would say. Yeah. And that's one thing, because we've been talking about this, I've been thinking a lot about it and going back into how I was raised. I'm so grateful because of the counseling that my parents had. Yes, it taught them. They would sit in the living room and they would talk through things. And my dad's also, he was a school teacher for 35 years. He's long retired, but he loves a chart and an easel and a graph and all kinds of things, right? So, and my dad loves conversation. He really does. So they demonstrated that in front of us so often, and even with their friends, and they would talk about things. And so us kids would be around, we'd be playing, making dinner, doing whatever, but they would have these conversations, and you could see by
the looks on their faces that sometimes they got intense, but they were never arguments. There was never any yelling, but they worked through things. They talked it out. And my dad's a great question asker.
Yeah.
He loves to ask questions. And so it was this awesome example, which then gave us the freedom when something happened, or it wasn't just like, go to your room. Yes, we would be sent to our room, but then we'd go in and have the conversation. Well, why did you do that? Wow. What were you feeling? How did that person make you feel? Why was your reaction this way? All the questions would come out. So I realized now, that was shaped me in such amazing, wonderful ways to be open with my emotions.
Yeah.
And that was because of my parents. This is so random, but it made me think of this TikTok video that I saw. Yeah. And I think the girl was like probably in her 20s and said something like, I'm very embarrassed undressing even in a locker room, like a girl's locker room, because I don't even think my family's ever seen me. Like I wouldn't let my mom even see me without clothes on. And so she goes, but then I was talking to girlfriends and they were like, no, if it's in front of my family or in front of my best friend or whatever, and the comfortability. And then it turned into like a poll. Like, are you the type of family where it was just, you got undressed?
Or it's modest.
Yeah. Or it's like, you've never seen, even when they're 5 years old, like you've never seen a sibling or mom and dad naked ever.
What was the answer? Most people.
Well, it was really 50-50, which actually shocked me because I had a very open family in that way within conversation, within everything in our household. It was open and it was kind of like,
not everybody's like this.
Not everybody's like that.
Which you found out when you got married, which we'll talk about next week. It all is different. And I think that's so beautiful and amazing. And I just hope everybody, again, I say this over and over again this season, but I just hope everybody feels a lot of compassion and grace because we can't control the families we're born into and we can't control how we were raised and we can't control a lot of the unhealthy things we picked up and that we learned. And I think that's okay. Like God knows that every little detail of your story better than you remember. He knows all of it and he knows how you arrived at that thing. But I think because we're not curious, because we're not gracious to other people and the world they're coming from, we just end up with so much conflict because we assume the worst and we assume that you're just trying to hurt me when really, like my husband just needed to learn. I mean, I'll tell the story next week, but he just had to learn how to help. He wanted to be a good husband. He wanted to be kind to me. He just literally had no tools in his belt to be able to emotionally connect and to deal with me, a big old me, crazy me. So, I think that's just a good thing to remember especially as we go back. Cause I think some people, and I understand there is abusive, there are times for just flat boundaries where that's an unhealthy relationship. I get that. But then there's also times where we write off our families when they were doing the best they could. And we never address it. And that's not fair either. Cause it's like, gosh, there are a lot of people that hurt their kids a lot. I'd say everybody hurts their kids.
Yep.
And many of them unintentionally. And so just having the grace to be curious, to share, I'm so grateful. And I know not all parents would respond this way, but when my kids bring to me what they're learning as adults about what was hard growing up and they'd never articulated it before, gosh, I feel grateful and sorry. And we get to reconcile.
Yeah.
And so if you're the parent that your kid's coming to you and saying, hey, these were unhealthy things, just own it. Like, don't be defensive because it doesn't mean they don't see all the good. They're just working through and wrestling through healing from the things that you didn't do perfectly. Yeah. And you're not alone. Like, that's not an incrimination on your parenting. My dad's the best dad in the world and we're so close today. And he's left such a legacy when he goes to heaven in the three of us and our families and his grandkids. But there was holes and flaws and there is with me too. And my kids are quick to tell me.
Because you only know what you know from what you learned growing up. So it's passed down. That's why we even see generational sin so much in the Bible.
Right.
And it's possible to break that. But you just think of the same way. It's passed down. So until you relearn, that's why people change so much. We change so much as we get older because we then realize, oh, I don't have to do everything I've been taught from my family.
Right.
I can look to a new source, and I'm praying that's the Bible for you.
Yeah.
But we can learn new tools, and we can learn from each other something that we've just simply never known. And just like your dad is this great example. I'd love to hear more stories about your dad. And same with me. I mean, I just see my dad is one of the most compassionate people. My dad cries. When I say at the drop of a hat, it is like at the drop of a hat multiple times a day. He's just become such a sensitive man, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you know that last year over 5 billion pounds of meat was imported and sold in the U.S.? Yeah. Avoid the mystery of the meat aisle with Good Ranchers. They are the #1 source for 100% USA-grown meat that you can trust to feed your family. Meat is often falsely labeled product of the USA at the grocery store, even though it's imported from other countries. Shop confidently knowing you're getting locally raised meat from Good Ranchers instead of second-guessing at the store. Make the switch today and taste the difference. Plus, when you subscribe to any of their meat boxes, you get my special offer of free chicken for a year. Yeah, that's adding 2 pounds of their fan favorite pre-trimmed chicken breast to every order for a year when you subscribe and use my code CANDY. Their beef, chicken, pork, and wild-caught seafood is all 100% USA sourced, which your grocery store can't say. Go to goodranchers.com, pick your box, use my code CANDY, and get meat you can trust from a company that has the highest standards of quality and transparency. You can stock your fridge with easy-to-cook, delicious meat right now at goodranchers.com. And if you're worried about getting meat delivered, I can tell you from personal experience, it shows up still perfectly frozen. Get quality, local food you can feel proud to feed your family. Go to goodranchers.com and use my code CANDY to claim over 25 pounds of free chicken today. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered.
I want to share a little bit of this in the Bible of just change, and for those of you listening that feel maybe discouraged or like, gosh, I'm the one hurting my kids. I'm the one hurting my friends. I need to heal. I love this story about the disciples. They're in a boat with Jesus and they're very emotional. And he gets in the boat and his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, and so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. And this is from John 8. But he was asleep. Jesus was asleep in the bottom of the boat. And they went and they woke him up saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." They're just freaking out. They're drama. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid, O you of little faith?" And then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" And they're just these kids. That's what I picture in this moment. They're just these kids, and they're just kind of a mess, and they're angry. They're like, "Take care of us. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to all die out here. That can't be the plan." And then just a little while later, he sends them out to go heal people and to do these miracles. And this is while he's still alive, and they can't believe it. And they've barely seen him do miracles, but they have obviously seen some. And he sends them out and he says, "Listen, I want you to go and I want you to do the things I'm doing." And they said, "Well, how are we going to do this? This isn't going to work." And then they come back from that and they all say, "Lord," this is in Luke 10, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And he said to them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I've given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." And the point is, they go out, they perform healings, they see the power of God even in their own lives. And then ultimately they will give up their lives, right? Like they will lay down their lives, many of them, for Jesus. So these men go from emotionally losing their, over a storm to just a little while later, casting out demons, healing people,
Wow.
doing all these things. And then just a little while later, they're going to lay their worst fear back at the boat. They choose all because of their view of God, all because of their view of Jesus. They didn't understand he controlled the waves on that day. They didn't understand that he was worth dying for until they did. Yeah. And so I just think that little snapshot of their lives is such a picture of ours too, that you might feel like this emotional wreck because your family was so broken, because you not only didn't have parents that comforted you, you have parents that harmed you. You have people that abandoned you, that left you, that hate you, and you have nobody. Like, that might be your story. And we just want to say, we are so sorry. Like, that is not as it should be. It is not as it will be. It is not as it should be. And I'm so sorry. And it's wrong. And God hates it because he loves kids. And he wants kids to thrive, and he wants kids to have loving families. And I'm just sorry. And that might have made you feel like you're so especially broken. Like, you are such an emotional wreck. But God is this force, this stabilizing force that issues peace in the midst of chaos. And I know so many people that meet him and everything changes, and all of a sudden they have peace. And all of a sudden, even though their past is so broken, there could be movies, really, really difficult to watch movies about their past. They find peace because of God. And through walking with God, maturity and stability. And all of a sudden, these people that feel like, gosh, I came from the most broken families, build the most beautiful families. Yeah. And it's not because they worked extra hard, although it sometimes feels like we do that to build beautiful families. It is because they've understood their place as a child of God, and that restores and heals people. And it's helpful. It's helpful and possible.
Thanks for sharing that. I know there's so many people that have broken families. I have friends, I hear it time and time again. And I want to continue to offer them hope and encouragement. And specifically, if the person hurting is a believer and they have family members who aren't, and they hate them.
Yeah. So hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage.
It feels hopeless.
It does.
Yeah.
But boundaries are a wonderful thing. Yeah. And prayer is an amazing thing. And you keep praying.
You pray, and boundaries are gifts. And we've talked about that already, I know. But I just want to reaffirm that is necessary sometimes. There's a time for forgiveness, and there is a time that you have to protect yourself or your kids potentially. I've walked through that with family, with friends that have had to do that. It's unthinkably hard as well.
Because sometimes healing isn't always possible.
Yeah. Yeah. But to everybody listening, it goes a lot better, and healing feels a lot more possible with just, I'm sorry. And how can I make that right? Those two lines, when my kids are talking to me, I'm sorry. And how can I make that right? My dad and I's relationship changed. It was one day, and I was brave enough to write him a letter. It was 6 pages long, and it was 3 pages of everything wonderful he had done for me, and how grateful I was for all those tuck-ins and the stories about giraffes and elephants. And I remembered all of them. And I just put all of that in there because he had provided for us and cared for us and done so much right as a parent. And may we always make sure as kids that we see the good and not just the bad, even though the bad hurts so bad. Yeah. And I wrote the 3 pages, and I wrote the 3 pages of how I'd felt hurt and criticized and such. And I read it, and I was so unsure how it would help, because in my mind, either he affirmed that all that time he had been critical of me, which would be just a hard thing to reconcile, or he would say, oh no, I never meant any of that. Like, I never was critical of you. And that would I wouldn't know what to do with that, because that would not validate my experience. So I didn't see a win, but I felt like I was supposed to do it. And so I did it. And I'll never forget the day. I was 30 years old, and I read it to him, and I don't think I looked up. I think I just sat there and I read it with tears streaming down my face. I look up at the end, and he's just weeping. He's sitting on the floor. I'll never forget it. And he's just weeping. And he said the most unexpected, beautiful thing. He said, let me tell you about my parents. Let me tell you what happened when I was growing up. And he said, because this isn't your fault. And he basically shared his wounds.
I'm crying for you right now.
I know. He shared his wounds. I did not see it coming. But it changed our relationship. It changed me.
Yeah.
Because no longer was I couldn't imagine a world where I was not at fault. Like I had done something to deserve that. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
That was the only thing. It was either it wasn't real or I deserved it. You know, there was the two options. And I never thought of it being like things from my dad, because we never think about our parents being humans and going through their own crap.
It's so
you know?
true.
And so it just, anyway, I think that I know. I love my dad.
What a gift.
I love my dad. That was the beginning of a real shift for us.
And so mature of him.
Yeah.
Because the reality is sometimes our parents aren't as mature as we are, as we all become adults.
Right.
That's a reality too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a beautiful
he was amazing
gift he gave you by sharing that.
Yeah.
This is a good talk. I feel like we're gonna move into a listener question.
Great.
So I'm gonna end it right there because it was so nice. This is from Fabi. She says, I've been praying for a miracle for my son for 6 years. Recently, I was feeling overwhelmed with all the responsibilities of life. I try to feel joy and peace by praising God when I'm feeling like this, but sometimes it's difficult to pull myself together. Do you have any advice?
Wow. Well, first of all, I just, there's nothing like our kids, right? That gets to us. I worry. I mean, the amount of worry in my life connected to sadness, anger, all of my emotions connected to my kids, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. They get the largest piece of the pie for sure. So I get all of that, just the worry and the stress of that. And our hearts, it's like part of our hearts out in the world that we just, somebody said we're only as happy as our least happy kid. And I've struggled with that in my life. But I would say this, it's okay to be dadgum sad about it.
Yeah.
And I know you want joy. And so there's a beautiful thing that we've talked a little bit about, that when we aren't codependent, which I hate this language because I'm like, at what point are we not codependent? Because we care. We're moms. Like, what's the? I don't like this language, but I do like the idea, and that's why I like the idea of our side of the road. Like, make your side of the road so good and beautiful, and trust him to God. I don't know how old he is. If he's in your house still, that's a really hard thing to do. But I have watched friends do it with a teenage child that just is choosing destruction. And at some point, we as parents can't fix it, Yeah. We have to wait on God. But 6 years of prayer, God hears it. And it could change. But part of trusting God too is investing your life and building your life into places where you can make a difference. I watched one of my family members. It was actually my husband's side of the family. They were so amazing. One of their kids just got into drugs and addiction. And I mean, it was just such a hard life. And we love him so much. We have a great relationship with him, but he just couldn't help it. I mean, that was the road. He got stuck on it, and it was just really hard for him to get off of. Well, his mama, as you can imagine, it just killed her. And there were times she didn't know where he was. And there were times he was in jail, and there were times he was in rehab, and it just killed her. And there were so many years of just grief. And I think that's just the natural response to something like that.
Yeah.
But there came a time, and again, there's a season for all things. There came a time to plant. And for her, that planting looked like ministering and serving other families who are going through this. And she just has had such a heart for that and been such a safe place for so many people that have struggled with that in their own families and their own kids' lives. And so at some point, it's like, okay, I can't control this. God has him. I know it because he always hears our prayers. But the road might be really messy. Today, our cousin is thriving. He's been sober for years. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
But I mean, it was longer than 6 years. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And so you don't give up hope, but you also have to untangle a little bit from the destruction that
right.
they're choosing. And it is hard.
It is. It's the hardest thing to watch your children fail because you want to scoop in.
Yeah.
You want to swoop in and scoop them up.
Yeah.
And especially when you can see it ahead of time, you want to prevent them from falling. And it's hard to break the bond in a way that is
still loving.
Right. But
healthy.
But it's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
But it's so hard.
It's so hard. And I haven't had to do it yet. But none of us know what's ahead. And I can't imagine.
I would also, I know you mentioned the word codependent.
Yeah.
And I never really, I've heard that word all over the place. And it felt like such a therapy term to me. But just in researching my own emotions and trying to, sift through them, I've read a few books on codependency and it was really eye-opening.
Yes.
So even if you don't feel like you are,
right,
or you're not in a place where it's, a dire straits type of codependent relationship,
right,
it might be worth it, Fabi, to read a book about it. Because I think it can just help you be aware of some of the things that you may think are being helpful that might actually be enabling.
Right. And so a quick little test for this is your happiness or your emotions completely tied to someone else's? And a lot of us are with our kids. And I had to come to terms with that. And really, especially my daughter, when she went to college, I felt like my mood was following her moods and kind of had to have a friend call me out and say, I don't think that's healthy. And it's genuinely not helpful to her. So it's not that when we feel sad with our kids, we're talking about an empathetic response because they need that from us, not an uncontrollable response where we can't pull up. They get depressed. We're depressed too. And sometimes that happens with a spouse, but I think it's an important conversation as we're about to talk about marriage and parenting as well.
Yeah. Oh, you guys, thanks for joining us. Tune in next week if you're a married couple, because we're going there.
Yep. It will be juicy.
It'll be juicy.
I have good stuff to share anyway.
Can't wait. Well, Jennie and I do have a free gift for you this season. It's a simple one-page guide to better emotional health, and we're calling it the Unwind Guide. And you can get it at Candace.com or just click the link in our show notes. Until next time, be grateful all day, every day. I love having conversations that help me grow. Click the thumbs up button if you want to hear more from Jennie Allen. Candy Rock Entertainment, all rights reserved.